Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the NGMI podcast, a show where I speak to people about crypto investing who know a lot more about it than myself. Now, today I'm speaking with Dark Forest. He is an analyst at the crypto venture capital firm Tangent Ventures. Now, multiple times throughout this episode, you're going to hear Dark refer to himself as a mid curve, and that could not be further from the truth. Dark is one of the most sophisticated and well reasoned investors that I know of in the crypto space. And every time I speak with him, I'm just left with this overwhelming sense of not knowing enough about crypto. I had such a fantastic time recording this episode, and I hope that you find listening to it as valuable as I did actually making it. So, without further ado, today's guest, Dark Forest. Dark, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Happy to be here. Happy to get into it.
So, I don't know, man. There's just so much going on in markets at the moment. Like, we've got Bitcoin halving coming up. We've got an ETH ETF that's probably not going to happen. All this stuff kind of whirling around. What have you been up to in markets at the moment? Like, what's kind of keeping your attention right now?
Yeah, just been trying to sort of navigate what people have been highlighting as like the dispersion that we're seeing. So you're seeing that strength in BTC, and I'd expect that to sort of transfer across to ETH as well if we get the ETF news at some point in the next year. So you're kind of getting a separation of those majors there. Meanwhile, at the other end of the spectrum, you've got meme coins, which are like completely unstoppable. And then everything in the middle is very PvP. And, you're getting days or, if you're lucky, sometimes weeks of outperformance, maybe across a sector. But normally you have to pick the right names within that sector. And so I think the difficulty has been sort of choosing your denomination. Like, are you going to sort of hold BTC, ETH, or Sol? And then jumping, when you want to jump out of that, what are you going to go into? And you've got to be pretty convinced that, you're choosing the right thing. So yeah, it's been tricky. It's definitely not PvE across the board. So yeah, it's harder than last cycle, I would say.
And what are your thoughts on that kind of like rotation game? Like, I'm personally not. I can never get the rotation thing down right. Like, I stuffed around a few months ago trying to, like, when Say was ripping and all these other kind of like alt L1s were coming up, I was trying to time those rotations and it was just relentless. Do you think that it's kind of just safer for most people to sit in something like BTC, ETH, Sol, and just stay there for the next couple of months, ride it out to the end of the year? Would you recommend? Not recommend, but would you think that it's a good idea to like try and time this shit, or like what does someone do who's like relatively active in markets? Like, how would you look at playing the rotations? Like, what are the signs that you would look for and like, oh yeah, cool, now's the time to rotate from Sol into, potentially another alt L1 or back into ETH, this kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think now's a good time to do the disclaimer. I guess you've steered me into that, which is to say that none of this is financial advice, and it is just my opinion, not the opinion of my employer. But yeah, I think that, it would, if you look at just the numbers, then it is definitely safer to sit in something like BTC and wait it out. The problem is, if you're here in crypto, it's probably because you're somebody that can't do that, and that you've found something that interests you, and here you are, you want to throw your money at stuff. So you sort of realize that nobody can do that. Suju famously said that the best way to trade these markets is to buy it all and then go into a coma. And so we know that, like, we understand that. And I think that what you should do, I guess, is sort of park away some amount into the majors, into your denominator of choice, and then you can play around. It's important, obviously, to know, if you're going to do that, like, where you sit on the food chain, I think, and just be like honest with yourself. If you're finding it hard and you're not catching these rotations, like, maybe it's not for you. You can sort of size down the stack that you're playing with, or you can just choose something that you really, really like and sit in it and wait. like we've certainly seen that play out, as simple as it seems, or as silly as it seems. There, pretty much every token, as long as you were patient enough, has seen a pump at some point. And it's not the best way to play the game, I don't think, but the rotations are extremely hard to catch. Like, it's literally my day job, and I'm definitely still learning, but it's one of the hardest things to do, I think. The upside is that you don't need to be in this stuff like before people start to rotate it. What you need to find is like those clues that tell you that rotation is going to happen. You can miss the first 10 to 20%. That shouldn't be a problem. But the key is then like finding that conviction to get in and ride the rest of the move and then get out. So yeah, just don't kid yourself, I think, and don't think that you have to be in this stuff laying in wait for like 6 months before the rotation happens. It's more about picking up on that zeitgeist and sort of feeding that into how you trade.
I don't recall quite where I saw it. I think it might have been a Lawleyette tweet, but it was talking about this idea of like, you don't need to be the first, you just need to be late early, essentially. Was like the kind of nomenclature he used. With this rotation stuff, what are the things that you're looking at now? Because I mean, we've seen like the past couple of days have been bad for ETH, just short term. And then, today, like just even in the last few hours, we've had Bitcoin pull back. The euros are out being like, it's over. So
yeah,
what are you looking at in terms of like, yeah. yeah. Not you, Dark. You're in a special category of good euro, I guess. No, you're welcome. But yeah, what are the rotations that you see kind of occurring now?
The obvious ones that are happening right now are Solana. I think that's been pretty well sustained. Obviously, the success of WIF and to a lesser extent Bonk have kind of kept that going. We're about to run into probably the densest period of airdrops since we had Pyth or Pyth, sorry, Gito and Jupiter.
Pyth.
Yeah, that's the British pronunciation, Pyth. Last year. So we've got Wormhole this week. In fact, we've got Camino. Tensor looks like it's going to drop. We might get Drift. So it's across the board, and that's all within 4 to 6 weeks. I've sort of tallied it up and either used like the pre-market values or my own estimates, and I think this could be well over 1.1 $1.2 billion of like wealth effect in a very short space of time. So I think that Solana's not done yet. They've got the technical upgrades coming as well in 1.18, and that should make shitcoining an even more pleasurable experience. So there's some stuff that makes it a little bit quicker, and then they're working on this issue that they've had with like the way that their parallelization works. It doesn't always manage to take account of your like priority fees. So I think they're changing the way that works. Is it like a trade sequencer? I can't remember what the technical term for it is. But what you should see is it's able to deal with different types of transactions better and sort of streamline them better, and then actually pay attention to who's paying more for their transaction and get them in sooner. So that should clean that up a bit. And then I'd say the second rotation that we're just seeing, probably just past the meat of the move now, is base. And that's been it's sort of been gradually and then all at once, I think, because it's kind of been there under the surface. You've had Friendtech, you've had Farcaster, you've had a few interesting like apps pop up, and then all of a sudden with Degen like catching attention as like that Schelling point as the token to go to for that ecosystem, and it's run up like crazy run up, and the announcement of the L3, you're now seeing base as like this place to go for, certainly for the Degens, I guess, hence the name. And yeah, so I think Solana and base, and you're obviously, the fundamental similarity between the two of those is it's cheap and it's fast. and that's what people want when they're playing
Yeah.
the world's greatest casino.
Which is kind of what's happening right now. And I've been doing a fair bit of shitcoining on Solana, and the kind of market, not shift, but just that kind of thing of like, oh, base is happening now. And it happened quickly. Do you see base maintaining that kind of attention share? It's one of those things where I see Sol has kind of emerged as that kind of market leader in terms of capturing retail. And that's going to lead into a kind of question that I want to ask around the status of retail as well. Because I personally think that retail is very much here. It just doesn't look like it used to. But, I've got enough anecdotal evidence on my end to think that I'm like, okay, retail's here. To what extent is anyone's guess, but I think it's a lot higher. Do you think that narrative of like, yep, it will capture like retail en masse as like kind of the more ETH guys are positioning it as? Do you think that's tenable?
Yeah, I think it's definitely set up to. You imagine you've got Coinbase as like the big pool of people and liquidity through which they can onboard people directly to Base. They've got a couple of really good catalysts coming up as well with their smart wallet. I don't know if you've had a play around with the demo of that, but it's really slick. It's just like Argent, if you've ever used Argent, but having this abstracted way to interact across, you can link your Coinbase account with an on-chain wallet, do it all in one location, and make these things very simple. And then with account abstraction, you can also have, because it's a smart contract wallet, you can have all the great security features as well. It just makes it I think a really good catalyst to get people sort of coming on chain. What else have they got? Oh yeah, Friendtech. So Friendtech probably are going to launch a token by the end of this month, maybe a bit later. What I like to see about all of this is that it's not something that has had a run before. So if you imagine 2017 was ICOs, 2020 we had DeFi summer, then we rolled that very quickly into gaming and NFTs. So all of these narratives have seen like a proper pump, and then coming into this cycle, AI has had that like relentless bid. SocialFi is a new category. We haven't had much to play around with in terms of tokens. Friendtech, Degen, like they're all coming online at this point. So I think the fact that Base is like heavy with these unique use cases or unique games that you can sort of play makes it far more interesting. And as a cycle, or throughout a cycle, you want to be looking at like what's the new stuff, because people don't necessarily know how to value it. So yeah, I think Base is not going to struggle. It might not happen immediately, but as they roll out these tech upgrades and you get new stuff launching over there, it's definitely an attractive place for people to go and play.
Do you think Base eventually pushes Solana out long term? I know you were talking, and I did have a question around 1.18. That's something I've seen, but I have no idea what it is. I should, but I don't. Do you know? Can you tell me more about what 1.18 is?
Yeah, so it's an upgrade it's due like in a couple of weeks, I think mid-April. As I say, it's got like this new transaction scheduler in it. So very layman's terms, because that's the level that I understand it at. But as I think they have like four, you could call them like highway lanes, 4 highway lanes. And I just realized I'm probably going to get on Mert's radar if I cock this up. So I'm focusing as hard as I can right now. Of which they can sort of, or if you think about them as buckets, they can fill up these buckets with transactions, and at the bottom is something that's like trying to work through these things as quick as it can. So right now, what you get is it's not able to like determine which bucket it should like go to next. So you get this thing called jitter, where like transactions are delayed or dropped because it's not working through them well enough. So this transaction scheduler, from what I understand, is better able to like deal with this incoming flow. And as I say, it's also going to increase the hit rate of your high priority fees. So if you're specifying a higher fee because you want to be at the top or at the bottom, I guess, of one of those buckets, you want to be there first, then that's actually going to start to work. Whereas right now what you're getting is people are unable to transact. And like, I don't just listen to people on Twitter, I'm actually using Solana. So I know that the UX has been very degraded recently. And that's what this upgrade is going to go some way towards improving. And so rather than everybody just whacking high priority fees and still failing, this should start to sort of order everybody much better. I think secondary to that, they've got these upgrades to their quick thing, which is the Google thing, highly technical. I don't really have insight into how all of this stuff works.
That's all good.
It's like way beyond my pay grade. But from what I understand of that, it means faster communications between RPCs and like the block leader. So that should just make the network performance better. And overall, I think if you put the two of those together, I think it makes your meme coining and your shit coining experience a whole lot better.
Again, I'm not complaining too much about like Solana UX, but there have been moments where like in periods of like high congestion, it's been really difficult to get transactions through, even with like really high priority fees, like fully maxed out, and it's just still not working. And that's like, yeah, is that thing of like, it's already really cheap. I wouldn't even mind paying just that little bit more. But like really, if there's something that can improve that, I think that'll be extremely solid. Yeah, it's an interesting time with Solana based, just general meme coin craziness. Like I have core positions that have barely moved, and yet memes seem to be just absolutely ripping. What are your thoughts on just the meme coin zeitgeist in general? I saw Arthur Hayes chatting with Raul about it, and he was essentially like, well, it just brings attention. Like it's not necessarily a net negative. Sure, some people will lose money in the short term, but overall, this is the kind of stuff that brings attention and is just value accretive in general. Do you think a similar way, or are you kind of just like meme coins should go get fucked kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot to say on this, I guess, but to start with, I'm not going to be someone that goes and writes a thesis on it like some of the VCs have been recently. I think it is what it is, like there's people that are here to do it. And I'm, if people make money on it, I'm happy for them. It's like, it's putting what happens in the market right in your face, because for every one of those guys that sat there from $300 all the way up to 30 million, if they manage to sell that, then there's got to be a ton of people that are buying that top from them. So it does raise a lot of interesting questions about, what are we doing here and how do markets work? And I mean, to your mention of retail, like, are we just wrecking people? But yeah, I think I'm here because it's permissionless and I don't like being told what I can do with my money. So I think people should be able to do this kind of stuff. And so I'll always support it, like support the activity of it. In terms of like where it comes from and why it's happening, I subscribe more to the financial nihilism side of things. Excuse me. So I think that comes from the podcaster Dimitri Kofinas, and then Travis Kling from Ikigai wrote about it. And those guys are basically saying, for young people nowadays, it's definitely harder. It takes a higher multiple of their salary to get on the property ladder, or even just to live the sort of the dream that their parents were sold. And so, because I can completely understand this, I'm sure most people who think about this actually feel this happening in their own brain. It's like, well, I know that I'm taking a big gamble. My entrance into crypto, I literally sat myself down and said, I'm going to put all my money into this, and it's either going to go to zero, or I'm going to make that leap in wealth that I need to actually get to where I want to be in life. So on a longer term time frame, I ended up doing the same thing. So completely understand where people come in and, they throw 500 quid into Coinbase and slap it on a frog meme, because as ridiculous as it is, you're far more likely to turn that 500 into 10,000, and then you've got some way towards a house deposit than if you wage cuck for the next 3 years and don't have a coffee every day. And it's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to compromise on your quality of life, or do you want to just take some stabs in the dark and see what happens? So I understand it. I'm happy for the people that have figured it out, and yeah, I believe that people should be allowed to carry on and have fun.
No, I'm of a similar opinion in the sense that it's like, I think it can be quite distressing to a lot of people who like truly believe in the kind of technological underpinnings of this space and want to see like the promise of decentralized finance like kind of exist, only to see that it's like, oh well, it's just a speculation engine. And I think that there's a healthy level of that meme of like, oh, this is all speculation, haha, everything's a Ponzi. But it, like, this kind of puts that on steroids, and it's just like, well, that's all it is. Yeah. So personally, it's the kind of thing that I'm willing to participate in, because I'm like, well, like, I don't know, if it's an investment, it's an investment. It's fine by me. But yeah, I don't really know where I stand on it fully, and whether or not it's a healthy or a good sign for this market in the long term. What do you think this meme coin mania says for the rest of the market? Like, a solid projects are these things that actually do stuff internally for crypto. Are they like left in the dust now, or is this something that memes will eventually blow off, or it will just be value accretive to the rest of crypto over time? And this is just kind of like a flash in the pan season.
I mean, it's certainly value accretive to the base networks. I mean, if it's happening on ETH, then you've got the burn and you've got an actual and tips. You've got the actual value accrual. But fundamentally, I'd say crypto as a space still regards itself as being so small that, like you've just done with that question, and everybody does, we lump everything together. But do you think that the HSBC executives are sitting around having a conversation about some scam going on in southern China and saying, oh, how does this reflect on the finance industry? Like, they're completely separate things, right? So if you've got something like Bitcoin, which has now established itself and is in the process of establishing itself as like an institutional asset, an actual asset class, a digital commodity, why does Bitcoin, or why do Bitcoiners care about meme coins? Like, why? It doesn't make any sense to me. I think they're completely separate, and we're sort of playing into the mainstream media's hands with, oh, it's all a scam and it's all this. And it's like, no, you need to separate these things. Yeah, it's all crypto, it's all digital assets, but what happens with a dog with a hat is completely separate to what happens with, a network like Bitcoin. So for me, it just, it's more fundamentally that. It's like, why do we lump it all in together?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I don't think I've heard anyone really make that just very clear, easy distinction. So thank you. I will farm this for content. What are people in this cycle going to lose the most money on, do you think? Sorry, that's a shit question. I just wanted to ask it. I was like, we're talking about meme coins. I wanted to lead in with it.
No, you did give me a chance to prep for this, and I'm still wondering.
It was like an hour before. I'm like, hey man, here's some fucking questions.
Yeah. Well, it's a Tom Mitchell Hill version of prep, so I should be grateful that I got anything, I guess.
It's my special.
No, I'm just kidding. So
no, you're very much not. I can attest personally. That is like, oh, you got an hour? That's fucking fantastic. No. I'll let you go on.
So I want to say everything, but I don't want to. Some people that will just bounce off of But anyone that's listening, like, I don't want people to get scared by that either. But if you look at the way that crypto plays out, and it is still a brand new asset class that's bootstrapping itself, you're going to have volatility. And even the best traders lose money at the end of the day. You should be deploying an edge that wins over time. So I don't think there's any way to like avoid losing money. For what will be the most spectacular blow up, I'm not sure. Meme coins, like, there's definitely going to be a period where a lot of people are in pain. I'm not sure how close we are to it, because I do see people, tweeting out that they're going to go up forever and I'm the richest person on the planet and blah, blah, blah. So maybe we're not too far from a cooling off period in meme coins. And at the end of the day, if you think about why people hold assets and what prompts them to sell them, it's conviction. And a meme coin is like the most fragile level of conviction, because it's like not a Mexican standoff, but everybody's sort of standing around looking at each other. It is a Mexican standoff, I guess, actually, but with
I think it is,
tens of thousands of people pointing guns at each other, and all it takes is that one hair trigger, like, nervous guy, and it just sets off, or girl, and it sets off the chain reaction, and everybody has to jump ship, and you don't want to be the last one out. And we've seen that play out time and time again. So I'm not saying anything new here. I just don't think they go up forever. So probably in the near term, that's one to watch out for. And then maybe a second one would be some of the current crop of AI coins, but they can like potentially do a tether where you fake it till you make it, and then you grow into your valuation and your token price. So we'll see on
that. That's a whole can of worms that I haven't even ventured into. Like, I've seen the whole BitTensor thing, Tau stuff just happen. I know freakishly little about AI tech. And so I saw Eric Wall talking about Tau and Tensor, and he was essentially just being like, lol, what the fuck does this thing even do? And why is it worth what it's worth? Do you know much about AI, or is this something that, you don't really want to weigh in on too much?
No, I don't need to weigh in on this too much. I think the best take I saw on it was somebody saying, if you know what you're doing with AI, then you're out alongside Sam Altman trying to raise $7 gorillion, rather than launching a token to support whatever it is you've come up with. So I think it's as simple as that. Every time I went to look at, like, I started looking into it, I don't know if you know the Jose Mourinho meme where he's like throwing his headset off, the football coach.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That one. I just find myself wanting to do that. I'm like, it's just not, it's like ICO websites, there's just a ton of stuff on there and you can't figure out what they actually do. I'm just kind of waiting for real use cases. And I think AI agents on chain, we've got this Wayfinder project from the guys that did the Parrallel card game, and the Prime token. So there's something interesting going on there, I think. And there's a few different projects that are working on that. Those guys are coming at it from the gaming angle, but you've got other projects that will just provide you basically with a front end, like a natural language front end, and in the background, some agent goes and transacts on chain for you. I think that stuff can be really interesting, because what can happen there is crypto can then make a leap in user experience that won't be seen anywhere else, where suddenly we've not only built this like financial network that allows you to transact freely, but you can do it in a way that's super simple. And so you don't have to log into your bank account and type in like 25 digits and ask for their permission and hold your cap out and then get your money put in. It's like you don't have to go through all of that crap. Crypto suddenly becomes potentially very simple, where you say, I want to hold 50% BTC, 50% ETH, and you just type that into a search bar and this thing goes away and does it in the background.
Speaking of AI agents, I feel like it's a very good segue to talk about um, one of your favorite coins, and I think one of our mutual friends' favorite tokens and just projects in general. And this is something. So Z's been on a bit of a hiatus of late, and so I haven't actually spoken to him much about Prime. I know that he's very happy with what's been happening. I still know precious little about Prime. I've done cursory kind of background research into it, but I think last time we were talking, you said that they were essentially rivaling Google in AI tech, which is pretty phenomenal because I've been bearish blockchain games just for a long time in the sense of I see them long term. And again, like there's cool novel tech that was introduced by a lot of blockchain games, and we can kind of go into that. But I do just think that most of them were just yield farming for early users. And they just became this way of being like, well, you just play the game so that you can earn the token. And the second that the token wasn't worth that much, it's like, well, what the fuck are we all doing here? Everyone leaves. And for those listening, the coin that we're discussing here and just the project in general is Prime Parallel. And so, yeah, I'd love to just get more background on Prime for everyone listening and essentially what they're doing.
Yeah, sure. So I'll do some definitions first because it's a little bit of a confusing setup potentially.
There's
But
a lot going on. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got Parallel Studios, which are the team behind Parallel Alpha, which is the trading card game, and this second game with the AI agents, which is called Parallel Colony. And then you've got a foundation called the Echelon Foundation, and that's the DAO effectively. Those guys sort of deal with tokenomics, governance, and that side of things. And so the Google comment was the fact that Parallel Studios have been working on this little side project called Parallel Colony, and it's a game with AI agents, but they're like autonomously transacting on chain as well as like playing the game like the way that you see it. And so Google came out and demoed the fact that they had these AI agents like working in a game environment, and it's 3-4 months down the line since the Parallel Studios guys showed their demo, so they're actually like ahead in that respect. And I think what sparked it all was there was this paper that a lot of them refer to where it talked about the idea of deploying AI agents in this way. And the guys at Parallel Studios sort of took that and ran with it. And like I say, it became this side project. And now it's becoming a much bigger thing where they've announced this Wayfinder project, which is going to have its own token called Prompt. And you stake your Prime and you get this Prompt token. And so the Wayfinder project takes the tech that they've built and then opens it up as a platform. So what that's going to allow you to do is you can become a Wayfinder and you can lay out paths for agents to take on chain. So a very simple one, you might say swap ETH to USDC on Uniswap. And so if you imagine the way that an ant colony works, when one ant finds its way to a nice bit of food, it's sort of laying a trail, but that trail will, the first time it will be quite faint. And then another ant goes and does it. And as they keep adding ants onto that trail, and at the end of it, there's this reward, you get a strong trail that like the ants can trust, and they know this is the way to go and get that piece of food, right? So the way Wayfinder works is very similar to that, where you'll have to like put some skin in the game and stake some money on saying, I believe this is the right route to go and do this thing that I'm being asked. And you can lay down that path. And then as others come and use it and they're successful, then you build up that trust, and they're going to be, I guess, paying you like a little bit off the top of that. And that's your kind of your reward for, behaving in the way that that network wants. So very similar in terms of like how the incentives are set up on something like Bitcoin or ETH, where skin in the game gets you that reward, and if you do something wrong, certainly in the case of ETH, then you get slashed. So Wayfinder works in that way, but with these AI agents. And so my completely unhinged take on this is that this could actually give rise to something on the next order of like magnitude of consciousness, because at the moment we've got these OpenAI LLMs, and they can fool us into thinking that like they're sentient or they're conscious, conscious to a certain level,
Mm.
but we kind of know how it works, and we're not ready to like say that is
Kind of just
alive
stochastic
yet.
parrots almost. Just yeah,
exactly. But if you put a ton of those things together, then and they start behaving as a colony, no pun intended, then you've got room there for like exponential types of growth, or at least different behavior patterns, like fundamentally, because they'll be able to learn from each other. And then you've got the human input as well. So you're kind of steering them. But at some point, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just in over my head and I'm talking absolute crap. But to me, I look at that and I think if there's already chances for LLMs to like produce stuff that we don't expect, what happens when you allow them to interact with each other, to interact like across a chain, and have humans like forcing inputs into that as well? It just seems like there's a big area of like chance for things happening there. So yeah, I just think it's a really, really interesting project, especially to have come out from a group that started with a trading card game.
No, that is. I think that I would be, and just purely on knee jerk reaction and knowing like very little about it, it reminds me of. I'm gonna completely blank on the name of it, but it was mentioned in something that Nassim Taleb wrote, and it was talking about. No, it wasn't actually. It was in a book called The Evolution of Everything by a guy called Matt Ridley. I think you would really like that, and I might actually send you a copy. I've got a spare, so it's one of these books that looks at like a Roman philosopher, Lucretius, and it looks at just the kind of emergent thinking in general. So this idea of like no more top-down systems. Most systems that survive and thrive are bottom-up, and it's just talking about the persistence of evolutionary principles and how we a lot of the time go through our lives with top-down models on things. And where we do create and foster bottom-up models, so capitalism, democracy, these kind of things, they tend to do very, very well. And so I think you might be onto something with this idea of you combine lots of LLMs together and let them do things organically and actually kind of randomly associate and assort over time. You could end up with something quite fascinating. Sorry, I'm not sure if I use the term LLM there correctly because they wouldn't be LLMs, they'd be AI agents. But yeah, I think it was in that book, there was this discussion around a study that was essentially looking at trading bots that were essentially given random orders, like commodity trading bots were given random orders to just buy and sell shit completely randomly. And then over time, these trading bots spontaneously organized themselves into coherent buying and selling orders over like tens of thousands of iterations that could then be mapped and you could come up with predictable, traceable patterns over time. And I just thought like, whoa, that kind of fucked my nuts.
Yeah, I think no, it's cool because that's if you think back to the like recent history of this tech, because it's been going for a long time. So I just want to like acknowledge that people have been working on this for decades at this point, but it's just recently come into like mainstream consciousness. But if you think of that AlphaGo thing from Google, like I don't know if you've seen the documentary, but Lisa Doll, the guy who got beaten, when I can't remember if it was like the AlphaGo won the first game and then Lee won the second game. And then in the third game, it did this move, which he described as being like unexpected and beautiful because it did something that no human would ever do and he hadn't thought of. And that was like the first inkling of how this stuff works. It's emergent behavior. It's stuff that we can't comprehend or think of. And so carrying that across to now, like we've seen some really funny interactions with LLMs and these interfaces, OpenAI. And then in Prime or in Parallel Colony, the guys have talked about some of the emergent behavior that they've seen there already. So they were saying that they did a play test with like 14 of their community members. And there was an example where I think one of the players was talking to his agent and saying, when I'm not well, my grandma used to make me mint tea. And when he'd come back and pick the game up again next time, he found that his agent, because he wasn't feeling well, had gone away and harvested some mint tea leaves or some mint leaves, sorry, and then cooked them and created this concoction for itself and drunk it and felt better. So it took on board what it had been told and turned that into like some activity in the game. So again, you see this emergent behavior, and it's like, as we keep developing these things, that's going to become more spontaneous, more unexpected, and just far more interesting.
Jesus. The level of like, it's bad, but my D-cell brain instantly just goes to all the bad stuff. I'm like, oh no, it's going to be, but at the same time, like it is, I'm like, oh God, everyone's going to have an AI girlfriend. We're all fucked. It's kind of like what I immediately think of. I'm like, oh no. But in all seriousness, that is, it would be profound to see this like unfold. If it actually comes to fruition at this level, like that, and I mean, again, just bullish Prime, but also that kind of tech and the consequences it could have just as a game almost feels like a first inkling of like a pseudo Ready Player One thing. Less VR oriented, but this idea of having like truly immersive worlds. Like I think back to Skyrim and just how into that I got like in 2012. And that was just like sandbox RPG. It felt like you could do pretty much anything in that game. So yeah, having a world where you have, in that sense, almost like pseudo-conscious entities to interact with that are remembering things you tell them and are doing things of their own accord because they think it might create an outcome. So it's essentially creating, proxy thought in a game. Nuts.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on it there, but they found in a lot of cases the guys that play tested it became attached very quickly. I think it was only a 48-hour playtest. And it's like a companion, right? Because it's not just a companion in a game that has a very narrow set of things that it can do. You're actually conversing with this thing, creating memories together, and it's interacting with you based on, the history that you have together. So I think there's a very strong level of attachment. And you can look at the negative side of that. I think that like a loneliness epidemic is going to suck this thing up like straight away. It's just going to absorb it. That's a whole nother podcast, I think.
No. We're just, sorry guys, it's not about crypto anymore. We're talking about AI and loneliness. Let's sorry, we've been waylaid. No, I do. My girlfriend just finished her honors in essentially looking at ethical implications of VR and didn't quite look into AI because it wasn't something that she was like properly across, but that's probably like the next thing. So we have very interesting discussions, and it causes me to lean a lot more towards the ethical conundrum side, because it's like, okay, there's lots of cool upsides, but anyway, we will not get stuck into this. Back to crypto, back to magical internet tokens. No, but that is fascinating. So I do think that Prime is one of those coins that people probably don't have enough meaningful exposure to, myself included. I think Z might be the only guy that has what you would call enough material exposure to Prime that I know of, anyway. Outside of Prime, what other core positions do you really like heading into this cycle? So obviously, like the actual boon of GameFi, that if it holds true to its promises, will be very interesting in Prime. What are the other narratives and trends that you're looking at and thinking like, oh, fuck yeah, this is something that 2024, 25 has in store?
I want to say something interesting here, but I'm just going to be really midwit and say...
No, that's fine. It's a safe space.
Safe space, thank you.
It is.
Yeah, I'll take my position atop the bell curve in that case. I like Solana. Like, I don't think it's done yet. I think it's...
Hey, that would have been a left curve thing to say like 3 months ago, man. So listen.
Yeah, there you go. I might have called the transition there to it's becoming midwit. Who knows? It was just so... It was
Ducks
so
in,
down.
everyone sell. I'm sorry. Yeah.
It was so beaten down, and you know, people have given up on it. And I think it's really coming back and establishing itself as the third network behind Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I think that's really powerful. Like the lindiness of surviving for this long and people going there for certain reasons. I just don't think that should be underestimated. And now you've got, you know, all the guys that were lining up, or guys, networks that were lining up to kill Ethereum now have to kill Solana as well. So you can be fast and cheap, but I mean, Ethereum's, if you're using the L2s, they're easily, well, like they are where they should be in terms of fastness and cheapness. But if you really want to go somewhere where this stuff like happens all the time, it's Solana. And so you, as like a Say or a Sui or an Aptos or whatever, or even the legacy guys like Avalanche and Phantom, you've really got to up your game and do something special to now capture more than just price attention, but actual liquidity, apps, users. So I think it's going to be really tough for those types of projects to, you know, just continually run through a cycle. Well, having said that, like that, you know, the ones that I've mentioned have done decently well in terms of price, but yeah, I just think there's a ceiling on what they're going to capture. You might be able to get those crypto native rotations, and therefore, you know, so hundreds of millions of dollars of TVL. But if you think about the onboarding funnels and how big those streams of liquidity could be for Coinbase users going to Base, and like people, retail users picking up a Phantom wallet and going on to Solana, I just think they're very hard to compete with. And I've been looking at the data recently because everybody was focused on like where is the Coinbase app in the rankings, like on the App Store and Google Play Store. And I went and took a look at where Phantom was and like versus MetaMask, and it's actually higher up the rankings than MetaMask at the moment, and it has been for like a couple of weeks. And then there was a bit of a lull, and then back towards the start of the year again, there was like Phantom flipped MetaMask. So what I see is these two like pathways for people to come and try crypto. Those are going straight on chain, seem to be going through Phantom, like that's doing well in its own right. And I'm assuming that like the majority of those users are going to Solana, even though they have a like an Ethereum wallet inside Phantom.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Coinbase funnel as well. So again, it sort of goes back to that dispersion. I think we're starting to see this separation of like what's going to be here in 10 years and what's going to have a little, you know, mini cycle, but probably is not going to be here, or you know, the stuff that's going to become the next Cardano, basically.
Yeah, I was going to mention that before. Like, even I've seen things on Avalanche, like, and again, I kind of start shit with guys with red triangles in their bios occasionally on Twitter just because it's fun. But I've seen things on Avalanche, like I've seen certain game projects and I've seen stuff happening there that I think like, oh, okay, like personal preferences aside, my own shitty opinion put to the side for a second, there's stuff happening on Avalanche and I wouldn't count it out fully. But Cardano, what is going on there? Like, and I'm like, you are someone who knows a lot about this space, but like, I remember Cardano was one of those things that like in 2020, they had all of these like wonderful, you know, I'd say really good marketing, essentially. Like there were all of these things that were like fucking smart contracts named after mathematicians and all this like really clean shit. And everyone was like, oh, hell yeah, this is going to be great. What the fuck is happening with Cardano? Like I'm yet to know anyone that has ever done anything on chain there.
Yeah, I mean, last time I looked into it was probably 2020, so my views would likely be out of date. But I figure that if anything is happening over there, then I'll very quickly hear about it, and so I could always take another look at it. But I fell into the same trap as you. Like I watched a few Charles videos, and like he's a smart, decent guy from what I can tell. He's a bit strange, but you know, I watched that and I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of see where this is going. And then, you know, I held my Cardano and I staked it, and then I couldn't do anything. And I just found myself Like everything that I was doing was on Ethereum. And so I sold my ADA bag and just transferred it over to Ethereum and got on with my life. And it's because these guys have built something that's great in their heads, but it doesn't work in reality. The reason that you don't see anyone doing anything there is because you can't trade, you can't, like, I don't know, I think you can liquid stake probably, but yeah, you just can't do any of the actions that you can do with the EVM or the SVM. So like it's a PhD's wet dream, but unfortunately it's no good.
Yeah, which is kind of phenomenal for a blockchain that's financial. It's like, what do you mean we can't trade? I think I saw something about shitcoins on Cardano, because part of my like really left curve meme coin thesis that I like put in the newsletter of just like low effort meme capture was just kind of go to the fastest horse of each chain, put a tiny bit on each meme coin relative to the rest of your portfolio. So it might be like a couple $100 depending on your size on each one, and just fucking set and forget. That's where I'm at, Dark. So you can see where you can see where I'm getting the edge on the market. But that was like a couple of probably about a month or two ago that I was like, oh, what if I just went and just kind of sprayed and prayed a little bit on each thing? And we're going like as far deep as I could, like ZK Sync memes, Aptos memes. Some of them have done well, others have not. But I remember just being able to not find anything for Cardano. And I was like, how can there not even be like a shitcoin for Cardano? And that's what really kind of cemented this idea of like, for me.
Yeah. It's an interesting point, right? Because like I'm going to get on my high horse here. It's only taken me 50 minutes to get there, but I think that...
Here he is. Here he is. Go.
I ascribe to the market is a weighing machine long term, right? And so I'm a big believer in ETH, like what it represents, like what it's doing, what its value is. And so I think longer term it can still be extremely successful. And I think if we go like super stupid with it, you imagine a future where Circle's USDC is, I mean, it's already regulated and already accepted in the US, but it becomes like the de facto digital asset for when you want dollars on chain. Like the government embraces it, not just accepts it. If you've got an outstanding supply of, I mean, Tether's at 100 billion. So let's go ridiculous. Let's say you've got $1 trillion of USDC on chain. The security of the Ethereum network is what stops that. Like at the most fundamental level, it's what stops that being attacked by like state actors, because you start to risk your like monetary power and your sovereignty at that point. So my absolute ridiculous bull case for Ethereum is that governments will stake ETH to secure the network, because they have an incentive to do so when a large part of their outstanding money supply is secured by that thing. And this might be 20 years down the line. But anyway, that's just a sidetrack to what I'm saying here is, after 4 years of being in this space and looking at Twitter every single day, like fucking waste man that I am, I've seen so many narratives come and go. People trying to tell me that Ethereum, like the stupidest one is Ethereum is so expensive, nobody transacts there. It's just like that saying, oh, that restaurant is too popular, nobody goes there. Well, that restaurant, like nobody goes there because it's too popular, it's too busy, right? It's like if Ethereum, if nobody used it, it wouldn't be expensive, right? And so you go through these cycles and you see every single day there's people that clearly haven't used the stuff that they're talking about, or they're just plain disingenuous, like assholes, basically. And they know that 90% of the people that read their stuff are not going to actually go and figure it out for themselves. So you can sway a large part of the group of participants just by saying that. So all of this to say, over a long period, I still think Ethereum will do well. And getting bogged down in like short-term price performance is, if you've built real conviction in it, then it just doesn't really matter. It just gets really tiring. And that's why Solana is super interesting, because I think it's now going through that phase of like establishing itself, like cementing its place as that third network. So to wrap it all up, you've got, you could put out a bullish tweet on Cardano and you'll get thousands of people, whether they're bots or real community members, turn up and like your post and say, yeah, this is happening and Charles is going to save us from the end of the world and all this good stuff. But at the end of the day, it just gets washed away. Like, how long do you want to hold that bag for before you realize that you've been duped? And in the meantime, as we go through cycle after cycle, and Bitcoin and Ethereum and other like apps or networks continue to like expand their market cap, at some point you just have to admit that you're wrong. And like I say, the market is the final arbiter. So I might be wrong on ETH, and I'm constantly trying to reevaluate that. And right now, I'm getting shit every single day, and like people are literally angry that anyone would hold ETH. It's still up 300% from the October lows in 2022, but it's like crypto's just mad because that's not good enough, and it's a shit coin, and nobody uses it, and the network's too expensive. But all of that stuff, if you just take 2 seconds.
Well, Doug, haven't you heard? There's Solana meme coins now. Why would anyone want ETH? We can buy dog with hat. What?
Exactly. Yeah.
What? Exactly. No, I see a bit of that.
I guess it comes back to that other point that I was making, which is like people who hold Microsoft are not getting lambasted on their Twitter account every day because some penny stock went up 500%. Like, they just don't care. It's like, I've built conviction in this thing, which is doing X, Y, Z, and it's at $1 trillion market cap, and I think it'll be at 2 trillion next year. And it's like, you can just stay in your lane and be happy with that. Build your own conviction, buy what you like, and just try and like let that noise brush past you or wash over you, because it's just a waste of time.
Yeah, that actually brings me back to a conversation I had earlier last week. I was chatting with essentially, a few different people it was for an article that I'm writing on regulations and looking at, tokenizing real world assets. What I thought was kind of going to be a boring piece, but then I started hearing from a lot of people that, lots and lots of institutions are looking to essentially tokenize assets like USDC, like BlackRock have done, and set up kind of like fund stuff on public blockchains. And that kind of got me thinking, and it made me, I feel like, a lot more open to the argument that you've just put forward there of like, we could actually see a lot of stuff built on Ethereum. Now, from what I understood, a lot of institutions are looking to BlackRock's lead in this regard. Essentially, like, putting $100 million USDC on Ethereum and being like, all right, we're going to try some shit out. And that kind of just opens the door. Like, I'm not even kidding. I was told by one like head of legal at a certain place that I was like, oh, like why the move to public blockchains? Why wouldn't you just build, Larry Fink chain and just do all of your shit there? Or sorry, for other organizations, like, why wouldn't you build an enterprise blockchain and have a private one where you just do all that stuff and you can skip KYC, AML, concerns of a public chain? And they said, oh, it's BlackRock did it. And I was like, okay. So it's just that level of kind of confluence of that decision. I don't know. Do you see any? What are your thoughts on that in general? Of just, obviously you're very bullish on chain tokenization, but how do you see it playing out more in the short term?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't my area of expertise. I think that it's very interesting. I think it's cool to hear you give that sort of little tidbit of information that you've had as well. Up until now, stuff has taken place on Ethereum between different institutions before. I think there was the one with the French government bonds and one of the banks in France. but they're I think they were smaller amounts of money, but still real amounts, in the millions. But it was just sort of one-off experiments. And then all of a sudden, Larry's walked in and he's slapped his ledger on the table, and he's deposited 100 million into this thing. I think it's way more now because Ondo has actually moved some of their OUSG backing across to this thing. And so it's like, it's not just an experiment anymore. They're going to run this thing with 9 figures, and it's on Ethereum, and away you go. So yeah, I'm interested to see how it plays out. Like, they've obviously instantly been attacked with deposits of Memecoins, Tornado cached Ethereum. So they're going to have to figure out all of this shit as well. And they must have known it was coming. So they must have answers for it. But I think the really important thing about this is that it gets a player in our court that understands both worlds, that has the power and the clout to actually go and get answers on this stuff. So you see that the poor bloke that developed Tornado Cash is on trial in the Netherlands at the moment, getting his ass kicked because he wrote some open source software. And now BlackRock have been tarnished with some Tornado Cashed ETH. So is that going to cause them problems? And if it does, surely they're going to fire up their legal department and take it to court and say, look, this is fucking ridiculous. Like, here's how it should work in this brave new world. So I think that's the bit that you don't want to underestimate, is that we're fighting all these battles. Well, I say we, like great people like Coinbase are fighting all these battles. And now we've got BlackRock wading in as well. And if you're going to like slap that much money into it straight away and commit to it in the way that they have, I don't think that they're going to let these little things get in their way. They're just going to keep steamrolling it in their favor, because that's how they work. So yeah, from that point of view, I think that's what's really interesting.
Before when we were talking about retail, I completely forgot to actually ask you for your kind of opinion on where you think, retail is at the moment. I feel like it's a very tenuous discussion. I feel like people are looking to a lot of old signals of like, oh, well, there'll be lots of interest in Bitcoin on Google Trends, and we will see certain things run to the top of the App Store, and that will be like the top signal. Anecdotally, I have a lot of friends who are not people that are not, instinctively interested in crypto, is how I'd describe it. Of them being kind of like, whenever I said I'd worked in it, they were like, oh yeah, nice man. Or it was like they kind of, or it was even the thing of like, oh, really, dude? What the fuck? Like, and they would tell people like, I have to tell my friends that Tom's a crypto bro, but he's okay. That was the kind of disclaimer they would give to their friends. And so it was that kind of stuff. And now they're very much like, oh, hey man, I bought these coins. I'm like, what? Like, when? Why? How the fuck did that happen? So I do think that it's further along and a lot more than people expect, just in my humble opinion.
Yeah, it's a good question, because everybody's thinking about it, and like you say, they're trying to figure out how do you measure it. The way that I think about it is, you imagine like a series of concentric rings, and at the center of that you've got the diehards who are here since early, and then you've got your sort of early adopters outside of that. It's just like that graph where you you have your the adoption curve graph with the crossing the chasm, if you've ever seen it. But I just think about it more in terms of like these rings, and how far does each cycle penetrate into these concentric circles. And this time around, I think some of these measures and metrics that people are looking at, if you think to your friends and our own experience personally, it's like last time I was Googling Bitcoin and I was downloading Coinbase. But this time around, I already have those things, so I don't need to do it. So by the time you see those metrics like really going exponential, it's like it will be pretty clear that people are here already. And so what we've seen is Coinbase app ranking like peaked the other week and then immediately like faded away. And that was all around, Bitcoin's all-time high. So you start to see that play out again, but it's not anywhere near to the extent. And we don't have the same setup as last cycle either, where everybody sat at home, nothing to do, receiving, government stimmies. So in terms of like retail, I think people use it interchangeably with probably the term uninformed participants, because that, as bad as it sounds, that is what people who say that are looking for. Because they're like, when are retail arriving? When is somebody who doesn't do any research going to buy my bag at a price that is way heavily inflated? That's what is really being said there. And if you look across what we've already touched on, there's a great example recently, this game on Blast called Crypto Valleys, which is basically DeFi kingdoms run it back turbo, right? Yeah. And if you look at the chart of the token, which was called Yield, it's just a Mount Everest chart, right? Which is exactly what you'd expect.
I did see that. I was like,
and you saw the same. So if you have any experience with Friendtech, so for me, as somebody who's been through the ringer on this stuff before, when Friendtech got really frothy, like I just rotated out of all my coins. It was when people were asking, like coming into your room and asking for you to 3-3 with them. That's when I started selling. And this yield thing was the same. Like I started seeing it pushed around as a narrative. I bought some, of course it went up, and I just sold it immediately. And that's what you're having to do at the moment, because it's not a rising tide being lifted, lifting all boats at the moment, because you haven't got that constant stream of new people who don't look at what they're buying, they just buy it. And so, to pull it all together, I think that's what people are looking for. I definitely don't think we're at that stage. We haven't like penetrated that outer circle, which has never been touched before, which are the people who, finally capitulate and say, I need to fucking buy whatever this is. And part of me wonders if there even is another group to touch, because if you haven't jumped into crypto at this point, like it's probably because you're too old to learn about it, or you're too young to like have the access to it. Everybody in the middle, surely if you're going to jump in, you would have done it by now. Like what's another cycle going to do to entice you? So yeah, I don't think that it's as important. Maybe the cycles are changing and this one is a bit different because we're being driven by institutional capital rather than retail capital.
That brings me back to something I saw totally as a ADHD point to throw in. I just saw a lot of discussion recently around like, will there be another cycle? And a lot of people kind of being like, yeah, like this is the final one. Essentially like 2024, 25, that's it. We're done. Do you think there's cycle 5, 6, 7, 8?
I think everything is a super cycle if you zoom out far enough, right? So if you're looking if you're looking at Bitcoin on the decade chart, then I don't know, maybe there's like, you don't see the cycles within that. So as with a lot of discussions, it comes down to like, what is your time frame? Because you could class every single one of these rotations that we see as a mini cycle. So to stop dodging the question and actually answer what you're asking, I think what got me into trouble last cycle was believing that it was going to be a super cycle. And so what I'm daring myself to dream about this time is that institutional bid is constant, and it will grow and it will fade, but it's there on BTC, and so I would expect it to play out somewhat differently. And if things continue the way that we have seen, what you'll see is like bubbles forming within different parts of crypto at different times. So like AI, WorldCoin is an insane FTV because it's such a low float coin. And so I think it will happen that way. We'll have like a longer, more drawn out period of stuff going up, probably led by BTC, and then sort of ups and downs within that. I don't think we're going to be immune to sell-offs at all. Like at some point, if the conditions are right, everything gets frothy at the same time. We trip into, institutional FOMO. BTC goes from 100 to 140 in like a month. That is, you can always look at a parabolic chart and know that it's going to come back down. But I just think the format of the cycle could potentially change, where rather than being like super peaky and it's all over within like 2 weeks, we could see a more drawn out period where you get pumps within sectors, and BTC occasionally like makes a leg up and then chops around for a long time.
I think I'm quite partial to that idea as well. But then again, I adjust my kind of my thoughts on what this cycle looks like every week, man. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, this is happening. And then I'm like, oh, maybe not. So I'm figuring it out on the fly with a couple less IQ points than yourself. So just doing the best I can. I do. What do you think? And this is something that, okay, there's a couple of things that I want to ask and not, get too into the weeds with it, because I don't know how much you are trading, BTC and looking at this. I mean, everyone's looking at it as proxy for price action, but with the halving coming up, which hilariously is landing on 420, like it's locked in. I'm just like, it's getting a bit memey. What do you think happens in and around like the halving period? Because I see like the Rect Capital kind of like standard format of like, okay, pre-halving retrace, wait a little while, it nukes, and then turbo Giga send to some ridiculous thing that he's put on the like log chart that's just like mute to like some absurd number. There's a few little pesky little questions that I'm asking in here. The first being like, what do we think of price action post halving in those couple of months? Like, is it going to be as aggressive as people think? And then I think the second one is, because so much of it's still dependent on that institutional bid, like it's so institutionally led, do you think that the kind of the floor comes out from BTC if those bids kind of chill out a bit, or is it more of like a backstop where you're kind of putting like the foundation in under the price of like, even if flows chill out, like it's sell-off territory?
So I don't think that cushion comes in until the groups that are involved with this lock in the I don't know if I'm using the right terms, but basically like the pensions and the funds, where they're like, we're allocating 1% to this. So as capital in each of these sectors grows, you automatically get a bid of BTC correspondingly. And we're definitely, from what I've read and seen, we're not at that stage yet. So the guys are still out there sort of selling it to the RAAs and the other groups, who themselves will then go out and like turn their machines on and start to sell it to everybody, all of their clients. And at the moment, it sounds like it's just retail, really, that are coming in here, and some of the more nimble RAAs and like funds that will touch this stuff. So then when you get to the stage of, and I think it's what they call the wirehouses. So I believe that's like the JP Morgans of the world. When they turn their selling machines on, it's like, that touches pretty much everybody at that point. And then once you start to get, whether it's like private companies or these funds themselves, or it goes into like a pension allocation, that you can just one click and it's like 2% Bitcoin, 60% stocks, and the rest are bonds. Like once that stuff starts happening, that's when you get the cushion. So I definitely don't think we're there yet. I think we've seen this new group of people come in, and I was very lucky to like speak to somebody when I was visiting Singapore the other week. Easily like the most wealthy person I've ever spoken to, and they basically came along and said, I finally understand it. Bitcoin is this perfect speculative asset, and now it's blessed by my mate Larry, and so I feel like I can trust it. And it just suddenly clicked, like the way that these guys and girls see the world. it just took that sort of red carpet, white glove, Larry coaxing you into his van full of candy, and they're on their way. And so you can see that it takes these guys a little bit of time, but they get there, and when they get there, it does come back to that meme where there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and so each millionaire can only hold like less than one, and at some point they're going to trip over each other because they're going to start competing with each other, because the first guys in will outperform the rest, and they'll tell them down the golf club or whatever. So that's the first group of people that we've seen come in. It's like, right, I wasn't sure about it, but Larry's told me it's okay, so I'm going to hold IBIT, and away we go. The next lot is the ones that I don't think are as active, but they have lots of wealth, and somebody on their behalf is going to start allocating it to Bitcoin.
Okay. And once you get that kind of inflow, you do just get a general kind of depression in volatility over time as well. Like once that kind of comes in, it's like, okay, we're not going to see these huge like 40, 50% potential drawdowns. Damn. I didn't get orange pilled until quite late, funnily enough. When I first got interested in crypto, I was strangely, I mean, I think it was more a situation of right message, wrong packaging. The only stuff that I really saw around Bitcoin came from laser eyes, like really obnoxious kind of laser eyes. So I'd let almost personal, just like emotion get in the way of understanding the asset. And for a very, very long time, like I'm talking not until about like a year and a half ago that I started being like, hang on a minute, what if I'm terribly wrong on this? And I've just been kind of pushed away by very obnoxious people. And yeah, it's very interesting to hear that that's happening for, people with significant sums of money as well. And not just in a sense of like, oh, they want to buy into the Ponzi. It's like, no, there's actual merit and value here. And that kind of brings me to this point of, as the next kind of like speculative layer on Bitcoin, and this is something that our mutual friend is very, very interested in, is this idea of like layer 2 applications. Essentially, DeFi, lending, liquidity, NFTs by way of ordinals on Bitcoin. Do you see that as kind of becoming something that, I don't know how best to phrase this question, but could the stuff on Bitcoin pose a serious threat to the stuff on Ethereum in terms of what's happening there, of like applications and of NFTs as well, in the sense that there's that status thing of like, okay, well, if Bitcoin can do even some of it, should we divert attention and capital there because it's the single greatest chair, we'll say, when not so much, I guess. Yeah, like I don't even know where I'm going with it, but I do see that. Would there be that wealth flow on effect from Bitcoin into the layer 2 ecosystems? Or do you think over time it's just one of those things where people think, what the fuck are we doing here? Why are we not doing it on the smart contract network? Very long way of asking that, but yeah.
No, it's okay. I think the short answer is yes, there can be like capital flow and success on these new like L2s that are being built. I'd want to frame my answer with like,
I'm sorry, I've asked the world's shittest question.
No, it's good. It's all good. Just because of like the biases that I have, like I want to recognize that. And so anyone listening, like I basically see the way that Bitcoin is treated versus Ethereum. So I come from the car industry. And the way that
I've just got to be like, here's 8 different cans of worms. Answer all the questions.
No, I'll get to it. I think I know what I'm saying. We'll find out in a second. So I come from the car industry. So the way that I look at it, and the sort of laser eyes that you talked about there, and the message that gets put out, Bitcoin is treated as though God came down, made horses, told everybody that it's the best mode of transport, and then left. And so a group of diehard people who first rode horses said, this is the best mode of transport there can ever be. And then, Daimler came along and Benz and Henry Ford, and they all built these cars, and they said, we can mass produce these things and it can do a better job than the horse. And all of the horse owners said, fuck off. The horse is the best because God told us it was the best. And the chances that somebody came down and created a horse as the best mode of transport and got it all right first time is, in my view, very unlikely. So I see Bitcoin as it's fantastic. Like, obviously, it sparked this whole thing. Satoshi was as a genius, but the chances that Satoshi laid everything out perfectly first time and got it all right is very slim. And so for stuff to go and build and improve on that, like Ethereum has done and like Solana has done and like all of the other layer one networks are trying to do, I think if they all started on an even point, then there's no way that you would select Bitcoin as the place to build all of this stuff because it's so hampered by its trade-offs. And so to get to your question, now that I've framed it, it's like when I looked at ordinals and how do you trade these things, it's like an oxymoron because you're trading a inscription of a grouping of tokens. So you can inscribe 300 tokens. But if somebody wants to buy 299, they can't because there's only an inscription of 300. So you're trading something that is fungible packaged up as something non-fungible. It just doesn't make any sense. That didn't stop people, falling over themselves to buy this shit. And that's fine. Like, you can speculate on this stuff, but when you look at a network trying to run back everything Ethereum has done, but in a far more janky and like trade-off based way, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And so again, like reverting to perhaps the mid-wit position, I'm like, it's fine for people to go and like play around with this stuff, and that's great. And I understand the want to like build this stuff out on the Bitcoin network because it's supposedly the most decentralized and the strongest security, etc. So that all makes sense. But I think the trade-offs are so great. That's why you're not seeing the uptake. And you will do, but it's like Stacks has taken 7 years of development at this point, and it's only just going live. Like, how hamstrung are they by how difficult it is to build on this thing that it's taken them that long to develop it? When you can literally one click spin up an L2 now, and you've got all the same guarantees and all the same integration straight away. So again, it's like, I'm happy for these guys, and I think they should experiment and see how it goes. But if the past, like the recent past, is any guide, this stuff is going to have some pretty serious trade-offs. It's going to be very hard to use, and that's going to deter a lot of people. And it's not just the ordinals; you see it with Lightning as well. Like, it just doesn't work, and people will try and tell you that it works, but anyone who then goes and uses it is like, "No, this doesn't work." So it's a question of, out of the probably 50 to 100 groups that are going to try and build something on top of Bitcoin, can one of them make it work? Quite possibly, but I don't hold out much hope. And personally, I'm just going to concentrate on stuff that does work.
Okay, that's fascinating, because there's two parts of my brain when I think about this. And I think one goes, well, it's very Lindy that someone would dedicate this much fucking time to building on Bitcoin. And so there's almost this theory of like, if someone's working that hard and willing to push it that hard, they're probably doing it for a reason, and it's probably going to create something that actually functions quite well if they're that persistent. Like, there's more errors and roadblocks to them making it. And I'm appropriating some other people's arguments in here as well, so these are not all my own thoughts. But that's like one side where I think like, what if they do crack something? And then alongside, I guess running in parallel to this argument is this idea that, so many suits and just people that are fresher to the space but have an idea of it. And this is purely like narrative kind of pulse here of like, so many people are going to come in, look at Bitcoin and go, whoa, hey, like, there's DeFi and shit on Bitcoin. Why the fuck aren't we buying this? And so I just think purely from a narrative perspective, it has a lot of potential to catch a bid, essentially from like sophisticated or pseudo-sophisticated retail that think that they're bidding the gold standard of like security and decentralization, essentially, of like, oh, we're doing it on Bitcoin. It will always be here. But then, yeah, like I just think that in exact mirror to that, so like the exact opposite side of that argument is just, well, at the end of the day, who fucking cares? People will go where it's easy and quick. And we shouldn't look to overcomplicate it too much. And so I think I'm kind of torn between those two positions on my thesis. And I would almost say that I lean more strongly towards being sympathetic to the L2 narrative of like, I do think that one might do something quite well, and that will be enough. But yeah, in general, I would say that instinctively, I prefer this idea of building on the smart contract, decentralized internet computer that is Ethereum, and that's why it's like my largest kind of holding that I just kind of sit on.
I see a fellow midwit. That's great.
Hey, there we go. All of that to be like, aha, this fucking guy.
Yeah, all of that, and you ended with, but I hold a lot of ETH. So,
but I hold like a. Well, actually, it's funnily enough, Solana has just kind of by proxy of somewhat okay shitcoining has shot up to become my second largest kind of holding. So I'm glad. I'm very happy. But ideologically, I sit heavily ETH. So ETH is probably like my main stack. And I think, and I'll kind of try and wrap this up so we're not here forever and I don't take up all of your time. And it's something I mentioned to you before, but this idea of concentration versus diversification in this market. I'm playing at the moment a relatively concentrated core stack. I mean, I guess that's not true because of the sizing of the positions themselves, and how they decrease and increase. But how do you think about concentrating and diversifying in this, like in these kind of conditions? Like, what's your go-to? Do you have any heuristics for how to approach this, or yeah?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Again, it depends on like how zoomed in or zoomed out you are, because if you went to a financial advisor in the UK and told them that you were in 100% ETH, for example, they would probably shit themselves and say, what the fuck are you doing? So like it's I'm not very diversified from that point of view. Again, to frame it,
purely a crypto bag. Like, we'll just forget that traditional finance exists in all of its forms and just be like, if I'm holding crypto assets, yeah.
So my perspective is like a second cycler, effectively. So what I'm trying to do is I'm not doing the full passive, deposit ETH into Aave, go 1.3 levered and sit and wait. But I'm also not putting 100% of my bag into like a 10-minute old meme coin, which is what I was effectively doing last time around. And so I think it just depends where you are in your journey. And early on, that is when you can afford to take more risk and you can afford to be more concentrated. The key that underlies it all, I think, is just build your own conviction. Don't borrow from other people because you will buy or sell at the wrong time. You have to know what you're buying, get comfortable with it, and just go in. Like the only way that you'll learn is by putting like real money on the line. And as you grow your stack, and this will depend on like where you started from and what kind of levels of money you're used to dealing with. But as you grow, you'll naturally be forced to like change your approach because you won't be able to, for example, throw 6 figures into a meme coin that only has 50K of liquidity. So the market will force you to change your approach anyway. So where I'm at now is I have like this analogy of like an aircraft carrier, which is my base denomination, and that's what I hold most of. And for everybody, you just choose, what your favorite coin is, whether that's BTC, ETH, Solana. Like the more major it is, the better. And then you send off your little fighter jets to go out and try and like win some missions and basically bring you back earnings. And you can convert some of those into your denomination, your aircraft carrier, and some of them you can obviously take for profits and try and like pay your taxes, assuming everybody's doing that. So yeah, I'm basically holding these majors and then jumping off of them to go and try and like increase my stack over time into like smaller stuff. Basically, is how I'm doing it.
Okay, nice. I'm glad to hear that we're doing kind of similar. I would say that I'm definitely in the more risk on kind of phase of my journey. But this is actually the first time I've really actively been like, okay, how am I going to approach markets? How am I actually going to trade things? Well, the first time I came in, I was kind of just like, I'll just DCA some stuff, and everything kind of went up and went down. And I wasn't on Twitter, which I would say is for worse. I was going to say for better or for worse as like a snarky thing, but I have a fantastic time. That's like the one area of social media that I am genuinely like enjoying. I doom scroll on other apps and I just think like, oh, fuck's sake. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, crypto Twitter, like I kind of wish I'd made more of an effort to save some of the stuff that happened last cycle, because when things are going right and like something crazy happens and somebody makes like CMS intern makes a video out of it, and it's just like I fucking love it here. There truly is no better industry on the planet when crypto is like pumping or dumping and just like some crazy shit is going on. And obviously it's all posted on crypto Twitter.
It's in real time. It is one of the strangest things that it's like, I can't explain. I don't know if other sections of Twitter have this kind of like, I would say level of like gravitational pull. Like once you're in, I do think about it, and I used to always be like, oh, if I ever made so much money, I'd log out of this goddamn app and I'd never come back. Fuck no. I'm stuck, man. I'm here forever.
Yeah.
It's hit that point where I'm like, oh, this is great. Like I've made friends on there. I enjoy what I do, which is mostly shit posting. It's funny. For a journalist, I do sweet fuck all of factual, interesting posts from like, here's the information I found by talking to people. It's always like, how dare anyone call the top? I'm probably too bullish on there, but no such thing in my opinion.
No, we don't take ourselves too seriously, and that's what makes it special.
I do think that is a very good kind of cultural element to it. Mate, was there anything else that you had a burning desire to speak about or bring up?
No, you gave me the platform to try and defend ETH somewhat. So yeah, I'm a happy man. It's all good.
No. Not defending ETH from me. I'm sitting here with, I think, like, I don't know what percentage it's at weighted, but I've been just putting ETH on a ledger predominantly ETH on a ledger for years now. So I'm kind of like, please come through ETH. Yeah.
We'll get there.
We will get there. That was actually another small question I had was ETH ETF, like little, I guess we'll finish on like a little predictions section almost. ETH ETF, do you think we're getting one in May? Because I know a lot of people still hold out this idea of like, don't worry about the Bloomberg guys. They're not going to, who cares? Larry thinks we're getting one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're getting one. Probably not in May. I haven't seen anyone explain how the process actually works if they deny the ones that are lined up for May. But I think BlackRock's deadline is August. And whether it takes longer than that, it's okay. At this point, crypto is inevitable. Digital assets are inevitable. As I say, Larry's slapped his ledger on chain and, 9 figures. These guys aren't doing that because they think that Gary and a very out of control SEC can get in their way. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of time, and I wouldn't be too worried about what the price of ETH is doing between now and then. It's like it didn't need an ETF to get this far, so yeah, we simply wait. But yeah, within the next year, I think either it goes to court or we get something in August, maybe.
Yeah, no, it's very much it's a when, not if scenario. Dark, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I really, really appreciate it. It's fucking always awesome chatting with you, dude. You always kind of impart some real knowledge that I actually take away and kind of mull over every time we talk. So where can people find you?
At Dark Forest Cap on Twitter. It's probably the best place. I'm fairly quiet on there, but maybe I'll make a bit more of an effort to spread the good word.
No. Awesome, man. Listen, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the NGMI podcast. This is essentially a weekly show where I kind of just talk to investors and people in the crypto industry that know shitloads more than me about tokens and markets and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a selfish podcast where I just really ask people my own burning questions. And if you've made it this far to the video, thank you for sticking around. You can find me at the Crypto Journo on Twitter. And if you have any guests that you want on, or you have any burning questions that you want me to ask people that I have coming up on the show, just send me a DM. They're open. I look forward to having more audience feedback on this, still in its early stages. Now, I also have a weekly newsletter called the NGMI newsletter, which comes out every week on Thursday. And it essentially is just a brain dump of my thoughts on markets, current climate conditions, some predictions, and some tokens that I personally like and invest in. And I round up people's investment theses and, just kind of put stuff in there that's hopefully useful to a lot of people. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.